Mo3's killer just reveals shocking details in court, and the picture coming out of that Dallas courtroom is darker and more complicated than anything the public has heard before. This is not a simple murder case. The man on trial right now is the alleged trigger man, and what he is revealing inside that courtroom is pulling back the curtain on a murder-for-hire plot that prosecutors say was arranged, funded, and executed by people in the same circle. For the first time, the public is getting a real look at what investigators believe happened on November 11, 2020, and why they are convinced that Mo3's death was not a random act of street violence. Stay with us, because what is coming out of this trial could completely change how people understand the final chapter of Mo3's life. But real quick, if you're serious about winning in the rap game, I put everything I know into one ebook. I'm talking how to actually grow an audience from zero, how to get labels reaching out to you with deals, and even how to get paid in this industry without ever touching a mic. And nah, it's not too late. People love to say the wave passed. It didn't. New artists and new hustlers are blowing up every single day, and the ones eating are the ones who started now instead of waiting. It's only $14.99. That's a few cups of coffee for a blueprint that can change how you move in this game forever. Links in the description bio. Go grab it. Then let's get back to the video. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we're breaking down the murder-for-hire case surrounding Mo3's 2020 killing, from the alleged rivalry that started it to the courtroom proceedings happening right now. Let's get into it. Melvin Noble, known to the world as Mo3, was one of the most distinctive voices to come out of Dallas rap in the 2010s. He was born on September 11, 1992, and grew up in South Dallas, coming up in an environment that shaped every element of his music. He built his following through a raw emotional delivery and a willingness to blend melody with street authenticity that made him immediately recognizable in a crowded rap landscape. Unlike artists who chased whatever sound was trending nationally, Mo3 stayed rooted in what he knew and what he had lived, and that authenticity translated into a devoted audience that kept growing. His 2019 song Everybody connected him with listeners who had been following him for years and introduced him to people who were just now discovering what Dallas hip-hop had to offer. He was developing real commercial momentum by 2020, with collaborations that reflected his rising profile and a fan base that extended well beyond Texas. He was 28 years old when he was killed. His music continues to stream millions of times. His absence left a hole in Dallas hip-hop that people are still feeling 6 years later. Yella Beezy, whose real name is Marcus DeAndre Conway, is another significant figure in the Dallas rap ecosystem who built his own following through a distinctive Texas sound and a connection to the street culture of the city. He had his commercial breakthrough with the 2018 song That's On Me, which moved beyond regional success and connected with a national audience. He built a fan base across Texas and beyond, developed relationships across the industry, and established himself as a real voice in Dallas. Hip-hop, he and Mo3 existed in the same world. They were once connected within the same Dallas music environment, sharing a city, a scene, and by some accounts a friendship before things went wrong. But something changed in that relationship, and the public record shows the deterioration of whatever bond they once had happening in real time through music, social media, and public incidents that kept escalating. By the time Mo3 was killed on that Dallas highway, the two men had developed a public conflict that prosecutors are now using as the foundation of a capital murder case that carries the possibility of the death penalty. The rivalry between them was not private. It played out in music, interviews, social media, and real-world incidents that escalated through 2019 and 2020. In January 2020, Mo3's manager Brandon Rainwater was assaulted outside a Dallas nightclub. Investigators say that incident is part of the documented conflict between the two camps. But the evidence generating the most discussion is the DJ Vlad interview. In that recorded conversation, Conway was asked about the conflict and made statements that prosecutors now argue are among the most important pieces of motive evidence in the entire case. He described the situation as having escalated past the point of no return and made clear that retaliation was on his mind, stating his intention to get even. Getting his lick back was the framing he used. Lead investigator Detective Eric Barnes testified during a pretrial hearing that those statements demonstrated retaliation as a motive coming directly from the defendant's own mouth. Barnes also testified about something equally important. When Conway did not mention Mo3 by name in public statements, That was not evidence of de-escalation. Barnes explained that avoiding someone's name is a calculated decision to deny them attention and views, rather than a sign that the beef had cooled down. The silence was strategic, not peaceful. There was also a history of conflict beyond the interview statements. Prosecutors traced an escalating feud that unfolded not only on the streets, but through Instagram live videos, public comments, and industry events. There was even a concert where police reportedly intervened over public safety concerns connected to the tension between the two sides. The documented pattern of escalation is part of why prosecutors are confident they can establish motive to a jury. Then came November 11, 2020. Mo3 was driving northbound on Interstate 35E in Dallas, near Illinois Avenue and Clarendon Drive, just south of the Dallas Zoo. It was the middle of the day, traffic was moving, people were around. This was not a remote location or a nighttime ambush designed to minimize witnesses. This happened on a busy Dallas freeway in broad daylight, which tells you something about how calculated prosecutors believed the operation was. Then another vehicle pulled up alongside him. A masked gunman wearing a ski mask exited a black Chevrolet Camaro and approached Mo3's car with a firearm in hand. Mo3 got out of his vehicle and started running. The gunman pursued him on foot, firing multiple rounds. One of the shots struck Mo3 in the back of the head. He was transported to a local hospital. He died of his injuries. A bystander was also injured during the incident.
A Dallas rapper was murdered outside of his car on I-35 near the Dallas Zoo. Hello, I'm Steve Eager.
I'm Heather Hayes. It is a stark example of the city's struggle to control violent crime. Police say the victim, a hip-hop musician named Mo3, was approached by the killer on I-35. Both men stopped their vehicles. The victim got out, took off, started running, but was shot several times on the highway. A bystander inside another vehicle was also hit.
The visual record of what happened is disturbing in its clarity. Surveillance video captured the ambush from multiple angles, including a shocking perspective that showed the gunman pursuing Mo3 on foot across the highway. That footage was presented during ller bond hearing in March 2025 and has since circulated publicly. It shows a masked figure moving with apparent purpose toward a man trying to escape on foot. The efficiency and directness of the attack is part of what convinced investigators from early on that this was not a random or opportunistic shooting. This was a coordinated operation, according to the prosecution's theory. And the daylight highway setting, shocking as it was, ultimately became one of the prosecution's greatest assets because of how much evidence it generated. The daylight setting of this killing generated an enormous amount of evidence. A murder that happens in an isolated location in the middle of the night is a completely different investigative challenge from an ambush on a busy Dallas freeway in the afternoon. Surveillance cameras were everywhere on that stretch of highway. Traffic cameras recorded the vehicles involved. Witnesses had visual contact with the gunman and the vehicle. Phone signals placed people in the area at the relevant time. Vehicle records provided another investigative trail. All of that was potentially recoverable from a scene like this, and the investigation moved fast because of it. Within roughly a month of the killing, investigators had identified Kewan Dontrell White as the prime suspect. He was arrested in December 2020, less than 6 weeks after the shooting. He was subsequently charged with a separate federal firearms offense related to the incident and received an approximately 9-year federal prison sentence for that charge in November 2022. But serving time on a gun charge is not the same as facing trial for murder. The murder charge, the one that put White in the Dallas courtroom for trial beginning August 24, 2026, is a completely different category of legal proceeding with completely different stakes. White is not the only defendant. Devin Maurice Brown is also charged in connection with the killing, with prosecutors alleging he was involved in coordinating the operation from the vehicle. Brown faces his own proceedings separately, but the judge ruled that White would be tried first, making this trial the opening chapter of the courtroom phase of a case that has been building since late 2020. Now let's talk about the connection between White and ller, because this is where the prosecution's theory starts to come together in a way that goes beyond simply saying someone was killed during a rivalry. Prosecutors are not just alleging that ller wanted Mo3 dead. They are alleging that he hired someone to make it happen, and that the person he allegedly hired was not a stranger but someone already trusted within his circle. And now that person is sitting in a courtroom, and the story coming out of those proceedings is pointing directly at ller as the man who sent him. This is the part that has the streets talking. Kewan White is the alleged trigger man. and the prosecution's case is built around the idea that he did not show up on that Dallas highway on November 11th, 2020 by accident or by personal motivation. According to prosecutors, he was sent, he was hired, he was the instrument of a murder-for-hire operation that ller allegedly financed and directed. The courtroom proceedings are now laying out that theory with evidence, and the picture being painted for the jury is one where White was working for Conway when he chased Mo3 down that highway and pulled the trigger. During a pre-trial hearing, Detective Eric Barnes testified that Quan White appeared on stage with Conway at a concert shortly before Mo3's killing. Barnes described this as evidence that White was trusted by Conway, that he was someone who had earned enough proximity and confidence to be put on a public stage. For the prosecution, this detail is not incidental. It is the difference between an alleged hired gun who appeared from nowhere and one who had a documented visible relationship with the man prosecutors allege arranged the hit. The concert appearance gives prosecutors a narrative they can point to when they argue that this was not a random selection of a stranger, but a deliberate choice of someone already inside the circle. And here is why ller should be worried. The evidence being assembled against him is not circumstantial in the way that most murder cases are built. It is layered, documented, and public in ways that are extremely difficult to explain away. There is a DJ Vlad interview where Conway said on camera that he was going to get his lick back and that there was no walking away. There are rap songs where lyrics reference paying for violence and putting money on someone's head. There is surveillance footage of the shooting itself. There is a detective who testified that the alleged gunman was publicly on stage with Conway just before the killing. There is a documented history of escalating conflict between Conway and Mo3 that investigators trace through social media, interviews, and real-world incidents. And there's an alleged gunman who is now in a courtroom as the first defendant in a case that directly connects back to Conway as the alleged organizer. When you stack all of that together, the prosecution's case looks formidable. Defense attorneys will challenge every piece of it, but the volume and variety of evidence pointing in one direction is exactly what makes people say ller is cooked. The alleged murder-for-hire structure of this case is legally significant in a way worth explaining. ller is charged with capital murder while remuneration. In Texas law, capital murder while remuneration means that the murder occurred in order to receive a benefit or financial settlement. Or in this case, prosecutors allege that Conway paid or promised payment to have the killing carried out. That legal structure creates a distinction between the person who allegedly physically committed the act and the person who allegedly orchestrated and financed it. White is the alleged gunman. Conway is accused of being the person who allegedly made it possible. If prosecutors can establish that structure to the jury's satisfaction, they have the framework for a capital murder conviction. The potential consequences of a capital murder conviction in Texas are severe. If convicted, Conway could face life in prison without parole or the death penalty. These are possible outcomes, not the current situation. Conway has pleaded not guilty and denied the charges. He was arrested in March 2025 after a grand jury indictment, released on a bond reduced from $2 million to $750,000, and has been under strict house arrest with electronic monitoring ever since. His bond conditions prohibit direct or indirect contact with any victim, witness, or co-defendant. For a time, he could not even leave to record music. A court modification in October 2025 allowed limited studio sessions once a week between 5 and 10 in the evening. That 5-hour window is currently the outer limit of his freedom. Then there is the music. The attempt by prosecutors to use rap lyrics as evidence in this case has become one of the most debated elements of the proceedings, and the pretrial rulings on which songs could be admitted set the stage for what the jury will actually hear. During the pretrial hearing on July 17, 2026, Detective Barnes pointed to 3 specific songs: Hitters from 2019, Keep It in the Streets from 2020, and On Your Head from 2020. Barnes testified that these songs contained references to paying for violence and putting money on someone's head, and that they were relevant to understanding the alleged motive and the alleged agreement at the center of the murder-for-hire theory. He argued that combined with the other evidence in the case, the lyrics helped paint a picture of someone who was not simply venting in music, but who was expressing intentions that eventually materialized in the real world. The judge heard both sides and ultimately made rulings that satisfied neither fully. 10 of the songs prosecutors wanted to use were excluded, but Keep It in the Streets and a redacted version of On Your Head were ruled admissible. A Mo3 song called 219 was also admitted. Hit Us, the earliest of the 3 songs Detective Barnes specifically identified, was among those excluded. The decision to exclude the detective as an expert witness on rap, which the judge ruled on during the pretrial hearing, complicates how prosecutors can introduce and contextualize the music they are allowed to use. Without a designated expert who can explain the meaning of specific language and imagery within the context of rap music, the prosecution has to rely on other means to make those connections for the jury. The debate over rap lyrics in courtrooms is not new, but it is particularly intense here. Defense attorneys consistently argue that rap music operates within the tradition of fiction, exaggeration, persona, and performance, and that treating lyrics as literal statements of criminal intent creates an unfair disadvantage for artists in the genre that has always dealt with themes of violence, street life, and conflict. The argument is that if a country song describes violence, no one treats it as a confession, but rap lyrics are often treated differently. Prosecutors counter that when lyrics contain specific references that align with specific alleged conduct, and when other evidence supports the prosecution's theory, the music can help a jury understand the defendant's state of mind and intentions. The judge's partial ruling in this case represents one attempt to split that difference. The investigation that led to these charges was built on multiple categories of evidence that investigators layered together over time. Phone location records helped investigators understand the movements of people on and around the day of the killing, establishing where specific individuals were and when their phones were pinging towers in the relevant areas. Surveillance footage from the highway and surrounding areas captured the ambush as it unfolded, giving investigators a visual record of the attack and the vehicle involved. Records connected the black Chevrolet Camaro to specific individuals. Digital forensics helped investigators trace connections between people through their phones, communications, and digital activity. Financial records and other evidence related to the alleged murder-for-hire arrangement are also part of the prosecution's case. Because in a murder-for-hire prosecution, the alleged payment or agreement to pay is itself a critical element that prosecutors have to establish. The combination of these evidence types is how investigators move from an unsolved highway shooting to a capital murder indictment. Modern homicide investigations depend on the digital trail every person leaves. Your phone knows where you were. Surveillance cameras record your movements. Financial transactions create a record. Communications, if investigators obtain the right warrants, can reveal conversations you believe were private. The prosecution's theory is that all of these trails, assembled together, point in one direction. Beezy's personal circumstances while awaiting trial are also worth understanding because they speak to how seriously the court views the case. After being arrested in March 2025 following a Dallas County grand jury indictment, Conway was initially held on a $2 million bond. A judge later reduced that to $750,000, and he was released in late March 2025 under strict conditions. He has been under house arrest with electronic monitoring ever since. His bond conditions prohibit him from having any direct or indirect contact with victims, witnesses, or co-defendants in the case. At one point, he was not even permitted to leave his home to go to a recording studio. In October 2025, after his legal team filed a motion explaining the financial strain his bond conditions were creating, a judge granted a modification allowing him to record music at an outside studio once a week for 5 hours in the evening. That limited allowance is the extent of his freedom while the case moves toward trial. A man who was one of Dallas's most visible rappers is now largely confined to his home, waiting for a courtroom to determine whether he will face life in prison or the death penalty. Let's step back and look at the full picture now. Because the trial of Keywan White is the first time that all of this is being presented to a jury in a formal courtroom setting, the prosecution has to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that White was the gunman who killed Mo3. They also need to establish the broader context of the alleged murder-for-hire arrangement if they want the jury to understand how this case connects to Beezy, who will face his own separate trial later. For White's trial specifically, the prosecution's task is to prove that he was the masked figure who exited that Camaro on Interstate 35E and shot Mo3 while he was running. The surveillance footage from the scene and the digital evidence connecting White to the incident are likely to be central pieces of that case. There is also the question of what the defense will argue. Defense attorneys can dispute the reliability of surveillance footage identifications, challenge phone location data interpretations, and argue that being seen on stage with someone does not prove participation in a murder. The standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which places the burden entirely on the prosecution. The defense only has to create meaningful doubt, but in a case where the evidence is this layered and this public, that task is going to be significant. Mo3's death had an enormous impact on Dallas hip-hop that has not faded with time. He was 28 years old, building real momentum, and his killing generated an outpouring of grief from fans, fellow artists, and the Dallas community that has persisted for years. The question of who was responsible became a persistent conversation that never fully quieted. For fans who have been following this case since November 2020, the trial of Q1 White represents the first moment when a jury is sitting in a room and being asked to evaluate the evidence directly. That matters enormously for everyone who cared about Mo3 and for everyone who has been waiting years for the legal system to address what happened on that highway. This is not simply another Dallas murder case. It involves two recognizable Dallas rappers, a killing in broad daylight on a major freeway, an alleged paid hit, rap lyrics as evidence, and surveillance footage of a masked gunman pursuing a running man. Every element is more dramatic than most homicide trials become. And the fact that ller is sitting under house arrest waiting for his own separate trial while the alleged gunman faces a jury is the development that people have been waiting 6 years to see. The timeline of this case is worth seeing clearly in full. Mo3 and ller were once part of the same Dallas music world. Their relationship deteriorated. Public incidents, interview statements, and social media exchanges documented an escalating conflict. In January 2020, an associate of Mo3 was assaulted outside a Dallas club. 11 months later, on November 11, 2020, Mo3 was ambushed on Interstate 35E and killed. Within weeks, investigators identified Q1 White and arrested him in December 2020. In March 2025, a Dallas County grand jury indicted ller for capital murder while remuneration. In July 2026, pretrial hearings included Detective Barnes testifying about the rap lyrics, the DJ Vlad interview, and the concert connection between White and Conway. On August 24, 2026, jury selection began for White's trial. The case that started with the killing on a Dallas highway in broad daylight is now inside a courtroom for the first time. At the end of the day, the most shocking part of this story is not simply that a famous Dallas rapper was killed in broad daylight on a major highway. It is that years later, the evidence that investigators painstakingly assembled is now being presented to a jury piece by piece in a formal courtroom. A DJ Vlad interview where Conway said he needed to get his lick back. Rap songs that reference paying for violence and putting money on someone's head. Concert footage showing the alleged gunman publicly connected to the man accused of arranging the hit. Phone records, highway surveillance, a black Camaro, detective testimony about motive, relationships, and the meaning of silence. All of it is now part of a legal proceeding that will determine what the evidence actually proves and who is legally responsible for what happened on Interstate 35E. On November 11th, 2020, the courtroom, not social media, not YouTube commentary, not viral headlines, is where this story gets its official ending. And for Mo3's family, his fans, and Dallas hip-hop, that ending has been a long time coming. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think this verdict